Case 1. Paris Mayo. It was the morning of March 24, 2019, when Paris Mayo's mother made a chilling discovery. On that morning, the 15-year-old's newborn son, Stanley, was found dead. Paris had given birth to him just hours earlier in the family home in Ross-on-Wye, Herefordshire, without any medical assistance. In a panicked state, Paris placed the baby's body into a bin bag and left it on the front doorstep. Her mother, unaware of the events that had transpired, found the body. The discovery immediately set off a chain of events that would lead to one of the most disturbing murder trials in recent memory. The police arrived at the Mayo family home and began their investigation. Initial statements from Paris indicated confusion and distress, as she claimed she had no knowledge of being pregnant until the birth. She said the baby was born alive, but she panicked and made no attempt to seek medical help. Police were skeptical of her story. After a thorough examination, forensic experts revealed that Stanley had been born alive, and the cause of death was suffocation. Cotton wool had been stuffed into his throat, and his skull was fractured. This shocking evidence pointed to a deliberate act of murder. Medical evidence played a key role in revealing the truth behind Stanley's death. Despite Paris's claims that the baby was stillborn, doctors determined Stanley had been alive for at least an hour after birth. Forensic experts found signs of life at birth, including a healthy heartbeat, and concluded that the baby had suffered severe injuries before his death. The cotton wool stuffed in Stanley's throat was the critical piece of evidence, indicating that Paris had intentionally suffocated her newborn son. This evidence undermined her defense, making it clear that the death was not an accident, but a deliberate act of violence. During the investigation and trial, much focus was placed on Paris's emotional state and mental health. Described as a vulnerable and immature teenager, Paris had a history of low self-esteem and felt unsupported by those around her. Her defense team suggested she lacked the maturity and understanding necessary to cope with a secret pregnancy. Paris was reportedly seeking affection and validation, and her relationships with her family, especially her father, were strained. Her father's declining health, which included undergoing dialysis at the time, added to her emotional stress. These factors were considered during the trial, offering insight into her state of mind. Paris Mayo's trial at Worcester Crown Court was a lengthy and emotionally charged process. She was charged with the murder of her newborn son, Stanley. During the trial, Paris maintained her story that she did not know she was pregnant and that the baby was stillborn. However, the jury heard expert testimony and reviewed medical evidence that proved otherwise. The prosecution presented a detailed case highlighting the suffocation and the deliberate nature of the crime. The defense, on the other hand, argued that Paris's actions were those of a distressed teenager, overwhelmed by an unexpected pregnancy. Ultimately, the jury found her guilty of murder. In June 2023, Paris Mayo was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 12 years before she is eligible for parole. Judge Mr. Justice Garnham described the case as sad and tragic, emphasizing the vulnerability of the victim and the breach of trust by a mother. The judge acknowledged the emotional challenges Paris faced, but he was clear that her actions were unforgivable. Paris's young age, mental state, and personal circumstances were all factors in her sentencing, but they did not excuse the fact that she intentionally took her baby's life. It was a harsh but necessary sentence. The murder of Stanley deeply affected the Mayo family. Paris's mother, who had discovered her grandson's body, was left devastated by the traumatic event. The loss of a grandchild, combined with the shock of knowing her own daughter had killed him, left an indelible mark on the family. Paris's father, who had been critically ill at the time, passed away shortly after the incident, compounding the emotional turmoil within the family. Paris's actions not only destroyed the life of an innocent child, but also devastated her immediate family, who struggled to understand how this tragedy unfolded. Case 2. Hassan Sentamu. On the morning of September 27, 2023, 15-year-old Elianne Andam was fatally stabbed outside the Whitgift Centre in Croydon, London. She was on her way to school at the Old Palace of John Whitgift School when she was attacked by 17-year-old Hassan Sentamu. The incident occurred during a confrontation involving Sentamu and his ex-girlfriend, who was a friend of Elianne. The altercation escalated when Elianne intervened to support her friend, leading to a fatal stabbing. Sentamu fled the scene but was apprehended by police within 25 minutes. Elianne Andam and her friend Hassan Sentamu's ex-girlfriend met him outside the Whitgift Centre in Croydon to exchange personal belongings following their breakup. Elianne's friend handed over a bag containing items, including a teddy bear she wanted back. However, Sentamu failed to return her belongings. Elianne, in a lighthearted manner, grabbed the bag and ran, prompting Sentamu to chase her. Witnesses reported that Elianne was laughing during the incident, which escalated when Sentamu, in a fit of rage, stabbed her multiple times, including a fatal wound to her neck. The confrontation occurred around 8:30 a.m. on Wellesley Road near the Whitgift Centre. Sentamu, wearing gloves and a face mask, had concealed a large kitchen knife under his clothing. After Elianne grabbed the bag, he chased her down and stabbed her 4 times, including a deep wound to her neck that severed the carotid artery. Despite immediate medical assistance from bystanders and emergency responders, Elianne succumbed to her injuries at the scene. Following the attack, Sentamu fled the scene, discarding the knife behind a wall in a nearby backyard. During his trial, it was revealed that Sentamu had a history of violent behavior, including previous attacks on girls and carrying knives. He had been cautioned for taking a knife to school at the age of 12. At his trial, Sentamu pleaded guilty to manslaughter, claiming diminished responsibility due to his autism spectrum disorder. However, the prosecution argued that his actions were driven by a short temper and aggressive tendencies, not his condition. The jury found him guilty of murder and possessing a knife. The judge noted that Sentamu had taken a knife to the scene deliberately and that his actions were premeditated. On March 13, 2025, Sentamu was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years. The judge noted the severity of the crime and Sentamu's history of violence. In his victim impact statement, Elianne's father expressed profound grief, stating that the thought of his daughter's final moments tormented him and that the guilt would weigh on his heart for the rest of his life.
Case 3. Maricela Nicolasa Diaz. On November 10, 2009, a fire was reported in a rural area of Hanson County, South Dakota. After extinguishing the flames, authorities discovered the badly burned body of 16-year-old Jasmine Guevara in the trunk of her car. An autopsy revealed that she had been stabbed multiple times and burned alive. The investigation soon pointed to 2 individuals, 15-year-old Maricela Nicolasa Diaz and her 21-year-old boyfriend Alexander Salgado. They had been staying with an acquaintance in Mitchell, South Dakota, and were known to have been in the area at the time of the murder. Authorities quickly identified Maricela Diaz and Alexander Salgado as suspects in the murder of Jasmine Guevara. Surveillance footage from a Walmart store showed the trio together around 8 p.m. on the night of the murder, contradicting Salgado's earlier statements. During police questioning, Diaz initially provided false information, including a fake name and birth date. However, when officers presented her Miranda rights in Spanish, Diaz acknowledged understanding them. She then confessed to her involvement in the crime, stating that Salgado had coerced her into participating. Despite her confession, Diaz's defense argued that her rights were not fully explained to her, leading to legal challenges regarding the admissibility of her statement. In December 2014, Maricela Diaz's trial commenced in Minnehaha County, South Dakota. The prosecution presented evidence, including Diaz's confession and testimony from Alexander Salgado, who had pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in 2010. Salgado testified that he had planned and executed the murder alone, asserting that Diaz had no role in the killing. However, expert witnesses testified that Diaz had been a victim of physical and sexual abuse by Salgado, which may have influenced her actions. Despite these mitigating factors, the jury convicted Diaz of first-degree murder and felony kidnapping. On March 27, 2015, Maricela Diaz was sentenced to 80 years for first-degree murder and 50 years for felony kidnapping, with the sentences to run concurrently. The court acknowledged Diaz's age and the abusive relationship with Salgado, but determined that the severity of the crime warranted the lengthy sentence. At the time of sentencing, Diaz was 20 years old and had been incarcerated since her arrest. Her life expectancy at sentencing was estimated to be 63.7 years, effectively making the sentence a de facto life term. Following her conviction, Diaz filed an appeal challenging the admissibility of her confession and the decision to try her as an adult. The Supreme Court in South Dakota reviewed the case and determined that Diaz had knowingly and intelligently waived her Miranda rights before confessing. The court also upheld the decision to transfer her case to adult court, citing the seriousness of the offense and Diaz's age at the time of the crime. In November 2016, the court affirmed Diaz's conviction and sentence, concluding that the trial court had properly considered all relevant factors. While incarcerated, Maricela Diaz has shown signs of personal growth and remorse. She obtained her GED and has been involved in educational and rehabilitation programs. Supporters argue that her progress demonstrates her potential for rehabilitation. However, the lengthy sentence and the conditions of adult incarceration raise concerns about the adequacy of juvenile justice systems in addressing the needs of young offenders.
Case 4. Kiyran Earnshaw. On January 16, 2020, the sleepy town of Huddersfield, West Yorkshire, was shaken by a horrific crime that would leave the community in shock. Robert Wilson, a 53-year-old factory supervisor at Thornton and Ross, was brutally attacked by two teenagers, Kiyran Earnshaw, 18, and Luke Gaukroger, 16. The pair ambushed Robert outside the factory, stabbing him over 100 times with a 20-inch samurai sword. It wasn't just a murder, it was a savage, frenzied attack. Witnesses reported the teens trying to decapitate Robert, a chilling image that would haunt everyone who heard the details. As the attack unfolded, the violence escalated quickly. The teenagers, under the influence of drugs and alcohol, took turns hacking at Robert with a samurai sword. The assault was so brutal that one of them was reportedly attempting to saw off Robert's head. This wasn't just a random act of violence, it was a calculated, savage act. Police arrived on the scene to find Robert lying in a pool of blood, his life stolen in mere minutes. The nature of the crime shocked even the most seasoned officers, and the community was left in a state of disbelief. Kiyran Earnshaw and Luke Gaukroger had troubled pasts that pointed to violent tendencies. Earnshaw, at just 18, had already been involved in violent incidents, including a stabbing at his school in 2016. Gaukroger, only 16, had a history of aggression and had been in trouble with the law before. The night of the murder, both were under the influence of drugs like cocaine and the powerful tranquilizer fluoprazolam, which mimics Xanax. Their violent behavior, fueled by these substances, created a deadly cocktail that led to one of the most shocking murders the town had ever seen. What made this crime even chilling was the demeanor of the attackers. During the assault, Gaukroger was heard shouting, "Get his head, I want to cut his head off." The callousness and apparent lack of remorse were clear. In the days following the murder, both teens showed little regret for their actions. They seemed more focused on the shock factor of their crime than the life they had taken. Police recordings and testimonies showed how they bragged about the brutality of the act, further deepening the horror of the community and the investigators. As the news spread, the impact on the family of Robert Wilson was devastating. His widow, Elianne Wilson, gave a heartbreaking statement in court, describing how her husband's brutal death shattered their family. She spoke of how Robert was a kind, hardworking man, and the murder was incomprehensible to her. She mentioned how the graphic nature of his death, including the attempt to decapitate him, was soul-destroying. Robert's family struggled to understand how two young men could be so brutal and callous in their attack. The emotional toll on them was overwhelming. The investigation into the murder was swift, as police worked quickly to piece together the events leading up to Robert Wilson's death. Investigators discovered the attacker's history of violence and substance abuse, which painted a grim picture of what led to the crime. Interviews and witness statements confirmed that Earnshaw and Gaukroger had planned the attack in advance. Their decision to bring a samurai sword to the crime scene was not random. It showed premeditation, as they were determined to make their crime as violent and gruesome as possible. In September 2020, both Kiyran Earnshaw and Luke Gaukroger stood trial for the murder of Robert Wilson. They both pled guilty to the charges, and the court was presented with chilling evidence of the attack, including photos and testimonies from witnesses. The prosecution painted a disturbing picture of two teenagers who, despite their age, were capable of extreme violence. The judge condemned their actions as frenzied and senseless, describing the attack as one of the most brutal cases he had ever seen. Earnshaw was sentenced to life with a minimum of 22 years, while Gaukroger received a life sentence with a minimum of 16 years and 8 months.
Case 5. Sierra Halseth. On April 9, 2021, a chilling scene unfolded in northwest Las Vegas. Daniel Halseth, a 45-year-old computer technician, was found brutally murdered in the garage of his home. His body had been stabbed approximately 70 times and was set on fire, rendering it unrecognizable. The discovery came after Daniel's landlord conducted a welfare check, prompted by concerns from Guerrero's mother, who hadn't heard from him in 2 days. The grisly scene was compounded by the presence of a chainsaw, circular saw, and a handsaw inside the residence, some of which were covered in blood. Sierra Halseth, Daniel's 16-year-old daughter, and her 18-year-old boyfriend, Aaron Guerrero, were quickly identified as the perpetrators of the gruesome murder. The pair had been planning to run away together. Daniel had intervened, forbidding their relationship and demanding they stop seeing each other. This led to Sierra and Aaron plotting to kill him. They hoped that murdering Daniel would grant them the freedom to be together without interference. Aaron, who had been staying with Sierra and her father, played a key role in executing the murder, and they both fled the scene after committing the crime. Shortly after the murder, Sierra and Aaron were captured in a disturbing video where they casually discussed the crime. The couple made light of the brutal act, showing little remorse for their actions. The video revealed their cold detachment and a disturbing lack of empathy for Daniel. Aaron even joked, "Welcome back to our YouTube channel, day 3 after murdering somebody." This chilling footage, along with evidence from their escape, provided critical details for investigators. The video would become central in their arrest and eventual conviction. After the murder, Sierra and Aaron fled the scene, making their way to Utah. They were eventually caught in Salt Lake City after being on the run for several days. The authorities tracked them down after receiving tips, and they were arrested without incident. During their time on the run, Sierra and Aaron showed little concern for their crime and continued with their plans, even sharing their journey on social media. The couple was ultimately apprehended and brought back to Las Vegas to face justice. As the investigation unfolded, authorities pieced together the motive behind the brutal crime. Sierra and Aaron's relationship had been fraught with tension, especially after Daniel discovered the couple's secret and banned them from seeing each other. Aaron confessed that he was under the influence of LSD during the murder, but authorities rejected his claim as an excuse for his actions. Both he and Sierra had been planning the murder for weeks, and they had carefully carried out the killing. Investigators soon discovered the disturbing details of their plans to flee and cover their tracks. In May 2022, Sierra and Aaron pled guilty to multiple charges, including first-degree murder, arson, and robbery. Their plea deals came after long negotiations and consultation with their attorneys. In court, both defendants expressed remorse for their actions.
Sierra, visibly emotional, apologized for her role in her father's death. Aaron also apologized, but his actions during the crime continued to raise questions about his true motivations. The guilty plea was a step toward justice, but it didn't bring closure to those who knew Daniel and had been deeply affected by his loss. In August 2022, both Sierra and Aaron were sentenced to 22 years to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 22 years. While their actions left a community in shock and grief, the legal proceedings sought to hold them accountable for the brutal and senseless murder of Daniel Halseth. The sentence sparked debates about the justice system's handling of such cases, especially involving young offenders. Sierra and Aaron's futures remain uncertain, as their parole eligibility is far off. For now, they must confront the harsh realities of the consequences of their violent actions.
Case 6. Daniel Harris. In May 2022, a horrific mass shooting in Buffalo, New York, shocked the nation when Peyton Gendron, a 19-year-old gunman, opened fire at a supermarket, killing 10 black individuals in a racially motivated attack. What many didn't know at the time was the influence behind Gendron's actions. His attack was inspired by far-right extremist views, many of which he encountered online. One of the individuals whose content played a pivotal role in shaping his beliefs was Daniel Harris, a British teenager. Harris's disturbing videos would set the stage for a chain of events leading to Gendron's deadly spree. Daniel Harris, a 19-year-old from the UK, became notorious for his far-right extremist videos posted under the alias Bookanon on platforms like World Truth Videos. His content was filled with racist, misogynistic, and violent rhetoric targeting minorities and marginalized groups. Harris used these videos to advocate for violence and spread white nationalist ideologies. His posts were more than just hateful words. They were calls to action, aimed at encouraging others to take violent steps toward enforcing his extremist beliefs. Harris's dangerous influence would reach far beyond the borders of the UK, affecting mass shootings in the US. Gendron's manifesto revealed his deep ties to the ideologies Harris had espoused. In fact, Gendron directly referenced Harris's content in his writings and even commented on one of Harris's videos before the attack. Harris's extremist views, particularly his calls for violence against minorities, played a crucial role in shaping Gendron's deadly mindset. This connection highlights the global reach of online radicalization. Harris's content wasn't just passive propaganda, it was actively engaging individuals with violent tendencies. His videos glorified violence against various groups, urging viewers to take action and spread hate. Gendron, a young man already steeped in racist beliefs, found Harris's videos a source of validation and inspiration. In his manifesto, Gendron referenced the Christchurch massacre in New Zealand, carried out by Brenton Tarrant, another individual influenced by similar far-right rhetoric. Harris's influence on Gendron was not an isolated case. It was part of a disturbing trend of online content radicalizing vulnerable individuals, leading to real-world violence. The influence of Daniel Harris wasn't confined to the Buffalo shooting. In November 2022, Anderson Lee Aldrich opened fire at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs, killing 5 people. Investigations revealed that Aldrich, too, had been exposed to Harris's extremist content. Harris's videos were even linked to a site associated with Aldrich's live-streamed preparation for the attack. Harris's influence continued to manifest in violent acts against marginalized communities, demonstrating the global and deadly reach of his far-right ideology. Both the Buffalo and Colorado Springs shootings illustrated the direct consequences of Harris's online radicalization on real-world violence.
In December 2022, Daniel Harris was arrested and convicted for encouraging terrorism and possessing material for terrorist purposes. He had used his platform to incite violence and spread racist propaganda. Harris was sentenced to 11.5 years in prison, a significant sentence for someone whose actions contributed to such disastrous tragedies. His conviction marked a major moment in addressing online extremism and its harmful effects. The case raised awareness about the dangers of radicalizing content on the internet, especially content that encourages violent actions based on hate and prejudice.
If this case gripped you as much as it did us, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the darkest corners of true crime history. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think really happened? Your voice keeps the investigation alive.